right, welcome back to Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. I, of course, am your humble, gracious host, Richie Mars, and I'm here with a very big topic today. But before we get to that, thank you all for listening so much on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening to your podcast. Thank you for following me on the Instagram, the Twitter, and the TikTok at Retold Richie Mars. But this topic is going to coincide with the release of the Iron Claw movie. That's right. We are talking about the Mount Rushmore of wrestling families. There's a bunch of families in the wrestling industry that help cultivate the sport we know and love today. But again, a topic this big, I couldn't do alone because this man gave me the idea to put this on the podcast. So all credit goes to him for this topic. You know him, you love him. He's been on the show before. Mr. Sensational Seth.
Sensational.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. All right.
How we doing?
Thanks for having me back, Richie.
No, thank you for the topic idea that I am shamelessly stealing from you right now.
It's all good, man. Listen, we share. Mm-hmm. That's how we do this.
Exactly. And if you can't share within the wrestling community, like how is your fandom really going, right?
Exactly. You know, if I can't do the podcast with you about this topic, then who am I doing it with?
You better not cheat on me if you go on other podcasts here, Seth. Come on.
We're good. We're good. We're good, Richie.
So what gave you the idea of having a Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling families?
Honestly, the beginning of Cody's song where he says wrestling has more than one royal family.
It's a good song. And
I started thinking, and I said, you know what? He's right. Wrestling does have more than one royal family. And I wonder if I were to sit back and make a Mount Rushmore of those wrestling families, I wonder who would be on it.
Yeah, so let's talk about how you compose your list, and I'll talk about how I compose my list.
Okay.
What were the qualifications for your Mount Rushmore? Because there's only 4 spots, so a lot of them are going to get the axe.
They are. They're going to be getting the axe and the smash. Mm-hmm. So for me, the first thing I thought of was, influence in the wrestling business. Mm-hmm. Okay. How have they influenced the wrestling business? If they weren't around in the wrestling business, where would we be where we are today?
Right.
All right. I also took into account the amount of generations as well as championship titles.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's pretty good. For my criteria, I guess you would say, is overall impact in the sport of wrestling. Of course, wrestling is a big part of it as well. So in-ring action as well. And just the impact of outside of wrestling. Like, what did they do to present wrestling outside of that medium in that criteria?
Correct.
Except for the professional wrestling standpoint, you're always going to have the outsiders who aren't really going to be sure of the wrestling bubble. So how do they represent outside of that? So without further ado, let's get on to the first one. And again, these aren't ranked. These are just our Mount Rushmores. So there's no 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st. We're going any order you want. So Seth, I'll put the floor to you.
We going 1 for 1? How do you want to do 1 for 1? I do 1, you do 1?
Yeah, and if we have the same one, we'll say it.
All right. Well, obviously, my first one's the McMahons.
I have that on my list as well. Yep.
No McMahons. We're not even having this podcast. Mm-hmm.
And not just Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon, Stephanie McMahon. It goes even further back to Vince McMahon Sr. and Jess McMahon as well.
Correct. I mean, listen, we all know the story about how Vince bought the company from his father, in the 80s, and then took it, global and made a juggernaut out of it. If you don't have the McMahons, we're not even here right now.
Yeah, we are not here talking to each other. We probably wouldn't be as close of friends as we are, Mr. Seth. I like you, okay, but
we'd be talking about other things. Yeah, and it may not be professional wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, that just even deviates even further, because if you want to go even further in the McMahon family, someone else married into the family, that being Triple H, who is currently running the creative of WWE.
He's a McMahon for all intents and purposes. He's at their Christmas events. Mm-hmm. He's on their Christmas card. Him and Steph have McMahon children. Mm-hmm. I'm sure at some point his children, his girls, will be involved. Mm-hmm. I'm sure at some point Shane's son, who we saw pictures of, playing football a couple of months ago, I'm sure he'll be involved as well.
Yeah, he was in the front row of Raw too.
Exactly. This is their legacy,
Mm-hmm.
and and Vince always did this for family. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure those kids will be involved at some point. Doing something. I'm not saying they're gonna be wrestling, but you know, it's their family business.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure they'll be
Well,
involved.
it's not a family business anymore, but they have a strong in, a very, very strong in
Correct.
to that business. And let's go a little bit.
I still say it's a family business.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I know Endeavor is running it, but I mean, listen, they're not, they don't have their own people, doing the creative. It's still the McMahon family with Triple H, doing the day to day. So, I like to say it's the family business. However,
Mhm,
they just have someone else they have to answer to now.
mhm. Yeah, it's still at its core, it's still WWE. It just has
Correct.
under new ownership. But let's go back to the McMahons and how
Yeah.
they became the juggernaut that they became. Because originally Vince McMahon Sr., it was the territory system. Vince McMahon
Yes.
bought it from his father for about $1 million, I believe it is, and there has been some controversy about the terms that Vince McMahon Sr. laid on to Vince McMahon Jr. about what he should and shouldn't do with professional wrestling. And some say that Vince went against his father because his father said, whatever you do, don't buy out the territories. And then Vince
And what do you do?
McMahon, that's what he did. He made WWE a global monopoly. Now,
Well,
do
I
you
think
think that
I was going to say,
hmm,
go ahead, go
I
ahead.
was going to ask, what do you think the impact that overall had on the wrestling business? Do you think it was a pro or a negative?
I think it was a pro. Listen, Vince, in addition to having wrestling in his blood,
Hmm.
Vince is a showman.
Yeah,
You know, Vince had the vision that maybe his father did not have when it came to taking it global.
right.
Vince saw things like TV. He saw things like marketing. He saw things like the action figures and the magazines. And WrestleMania, getting involved with celebrities that are mainstream. His father didn't do that.
Hmm.
That's all from the mind of Vince. Um, you know, when you look at WrestleMania, I mean, you had Hulk Hogan, you had Mr. T on one team,
Hmm.
you had Liberace involved, you had Billy Martin involved, you had Cyndi Lauper involved. I mean, it was mainstream people all over the place.
Hmm.
So you got people who were not even wrestling fans maybe to watch it
Hmm.
because they wanted to see who their favorite celebrities or how their favorite celebrities were involved,
Yeah,
and it's always been like that.
and the whole mainstream thing is a very important thing in Crutch because without it, we wouldn't have wrestling as we know as today, as
Yeah.
we've discussed. But let's talk about a little bit down the line with the McMahon's impact as it goes on. Do you think there were a couple of years where there was a desire of not having a McMahon in wrestling, like in a wrestling company that would help the business as a whole?
Well, I mean, I think that depends on who you asked.
Hmm.
I think if you asked other wrestling promoters, they would agree to that.
Hmm.
Um, but again, I think Vince McMahon is good for wrestling.
Right.
you know because here's the thing, just all you gotta do is think back to the 90s even. What did WCW do? They emulated WWE. They emulated what Vince McMahon was doing. They went mainstream. They got involved on everything. They got the Tonight Show with Jay Leno and Carl Malone, and they got involved doing the same thing Vince was doing.
Hmm.
So Vince has been a you know he's been a roadblock for some people,
Hmm.
but at the same time he's been an icon, and he's been someone that people can emulate.
Yeah, and let's talk about some of the controversies. I'm not really going to be talking about the
Yeah.
current controversies that Vince McMahon. I'm talking about once they were thrusted in the mainstream, and then you had, the steroid trial, and you had
Okay.
uh, the U.S. government versus the McMahon family. Then you had the downturn of the business. Do you
Mhm.
think because Vince
The new
McMahon,
generation.
yeah, the new the new generation, everyone was on occupation, Duke the Dumpster,
Yes.
all those guys. Now you had
MVP.
you had
Abe Knuckleball Schwartz.
oh god, if he was in the Hall of Fame, oh God bless him. But going back to all those controversies, do you
Mhm.
think Vince McMahon, as important as he was to WWE and its growth overall, that he could have also been its biggest hindrance at certain times?
Oh yeah. I mean, listen. if one of those controversy goes the wrong way, the company's done. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if Vince McMahon is found guilty by the U.S. government, they're done.
Mm-hmm.
If the steroid trial goes the wrong way, they're done.
Mm-hmm.
If WrestleMania didn't go the way it did, Vince McMahon, not only would he be done, he would have lost his home, right? Didn't he take a second morttage out?
Yeah,
Is that how the story
I
goes?
believe he put 3 people in charge in case he was to get imprisoned in the
Yes.
trial. I believe Jerry Jarrett was one of them. I think Pat Patterson might have been,
Yeah.
and was
So
it Bruce? Was it Bruce or somebody
I want to
else?
say it was. It might. Yeah. I want to say it was Bruce, but definitely I know Pat Patterson was in.
Yeah. So again, there was a contingency plan just in case the uh, the boat kind of sunk on the McMahon family
Yes.
ship.
Titanic.
And let's go a little bit further. Let's go to other members of the McMahon family since we focused a
Yeah.
lot on Vince. We had Linda, who was the COO, and then she
Yep.
served under the Trump presidency
Yep.
as a part of his cabinet.
His cabinet.
And then you
Yep.
have Shane McMahon, who for a lot of times people thought he would be the one to be
Yes.
the one to get WWE. Of course, that didn't happen, but it
Correct.
seemed like he was the rebel of the McMahon family in terms of being a performer and being not so much of a creative force behind the scenes, but character wise, he was probably, I'm not sure if versatile is the right word, but it's like he seemed to like the cool McMahon for a while.
Yeah. I mean, remember? I mean, there was a time where he was, he was a referee. He was a commentator. He was, you know, he was the cool McMahon. He worked. He was part of running the corporation in the late '90s. He storyline wise bought out WCW. He's got a great theme song.
Yeah.
And then he decided in the early 2000s he wanted to go off on his own.
Yeah, 2009 he went to he's had his resignation, and then he left. He came back, had that match with the Undertaker, and out of all the matches the Undertaker had at WrestleMania, that was indeed one of them. No fault of their own, because that WrestleMania was a snake-bitten WrestleMania with injuries, and there were a lot of
Yes.
things that were in the
Well,
cards.
storyline wise, it didn't really make sense either.
We never found out what the
Yes,
lockbox was, did we?
we never found out what was in the lockbox. Shane comes back, he interrupts the Vincent J. McMahon Legacy Awards ceremony for Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
Vince goes to hug him. Shane doesn't want any part of him.
Mm-hmm.
Talks about a lockbox. Talks about how Stephanie and Triple H have run the company into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Which got a big pop from the audience. And the next thing you knew, Vince is booking him in a match with the Undertaker. It just didn't make sense. Of all the people,
Mm-hmm.
In a Hell in a Cell match, nonetheless, which I think was just done, obviously, to get a Shane spot.
Got to get a jump
from
in
the
there,
top. Correct.
All right.
Correct.
And then we transition over to Stephanie McMahon, and she really did have a business mind, a business acumen,
Yeah.
and a lot of people have been saying that she's more of Vince's daughter than Shane was his son. Shane was more like Linda McMahon. How did you feel about Stephanie McMahon, the performer, and how did she grow over the years, in your opinion?
I mean, she started as Vince's little girl,
Mm-hmm.
Then with the whole marriage with Triple H in '99, and the McMahon Helmsley era, that was great. She, again, then you had the heel Stephanie also wrestling, winning championships, and then babyface Stephanie going in a father versus daughter match.
I actually did like babyface Stephanie a lot.
I did,
because that's when
she was running SmackDown.
Yeah, that's when I joined SmackDown or just started watching WWE. I didn't sign my SmackDown contract. Unfortunately, that day hasn't come yet. But it was jarring as a kid because I didn't know the concept of pay-per-view. So like one week Stephanie was there, and then I'm just like, what? I'm like, I don't think I missed last week. And then you had this sweaty man with a baseball hat being the new general manager of SmackDown, that being Paul E. Dangerously.
Yes.
So a lot of good memories there.
A lot of good memories, and I mean, then you just look on the corporate end. I mean, look at, I mean, Stephanie. From what I remember, wasn't Stephanie a big part of the launch of the network as well?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Yeah.
So, I mean,
some say she started the women's revolution.
Yeah, she might have with her tweet. Yeah. That network which, by the way, I mean, I think we've talked about this, was a lot better before it went on Peacock when it was its own
It was
standalone.
definitely easier
They had
on the
their own,
network.
and they had their own, original content more regularly than they do now.
Well, the everyone across the pond, across everywhere but United States has the WWE network.
Yes,
So they don't have that issue. We do, unfortunately.
we do. We don't get to see any of those cool shows anymore. My favorite one was the road trip one where they would leave from one show and drive to the next one.
Oh yeah, Ride Along. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked Ride Along.
Yeah.
I also liked I also like the the 24/7 and the 360.
Yeah.
We don't really see those anymore.
Great documentaries.
Yeah.
Check them out if you want. But overall, the McMahons being on both our Mount Rushmores, they have a solid place. Without them, wrestling would never be the same.
So if we're putting them on the mountain, Richie, whose picture are we using?
Probably have to go Washington, don't we?
Well, no, but
Oh wait,
whose picture though? Is it Vince's picture?
well,
Is it Stephanie? Shane? Is it all three of them? Is it his father? Is it Vincent Senior? Like, whose picture is going on the mountain?
it's gonna be like well, if Vince had to say, you will see his mustache face
Yes,
on that mountain first, and then little bitty images of everybody else.
almost like a Hydra.
Yeah. All right, so we have Mr. McMahon and his family on our respective Mount Rushmores.
I have a feeling we're gonna. I feel like our number twos are probably gonna be the same as well.
All right, so I'm gonna throw a curveball at you because
Oh,
I do feel
okay,
like our number twos are gonna be similar. So why don't I say something that I don't think is on your Mount
okay,
Rushmore? More,
okay.
I put the Guerrero family.
I had them as a possible. They're down as a possible.
Oh, okay.
I had them as a possibility because they were pretty influential. Obviously, very influential in Mexico.
Mhm.
Um, they wrestled. They as far as the U.S. Mondo, Hector, uh,
Chavo Senior.
Chavo Senior. They were all wrestling with AWA.
Mhm.
When I was a kid. Um, Eddie came in. With ECW and WCW. I mean, yeah. Again, they were one of mine. Where I'm like, who do I put them in? So I have them on the maybes.
Yeah, so this is my reasoning for having the Guerrero family on my Mount Rushmore because not only in the in-ring product of wrestling were they influential, but outside of wrestling they were just as influential in my opinion because you had
Yeah.
Mondo who was a big influence in Glow. You have Chavo Guerrero Jr. who's now working in Hollywood with all those wrestling
Yes.
projects with Young Rock and the Iron Claw as we were talking about
Yep.
earlier
Mhm.
and even the Glow TV show. So they really
Yep.
do help bring wrestling into a brand new light and a more serious tone than you would see in other television depictions of wrestling where everything was pile driver, punch, kick, like all
Right.
this brooding. So they're putting like a big respect into the name. And then the in-ring aspect, Gory Guerrero invented the camel clutch,
Yeah.
that is still being used to this day. Chavo Guerrero
They,
Sr. was the first one to bring the moonsault to America overall.
they did bring Rey Mysterio. They brought Rey Mysterio in. They trained him.
Uh, I believe I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I
about
believe. I,
that.
I believe. I believe. Right in the biography. Well, maybe not trained him, but I
They
believe
would
Eddie
meet
was very
they would meet in
instrumental.
shows a lot. They would meet at
Yes,
shows because Eddie was
Eddie was
just
very
like
very
yeah,
instrumental.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
Yeah.
impact in there.
You know, I again they were on my.
No pun intended because
Oh,
Hector was a impact commentator for a little bit
yes.
for and a
And like I
manager
said,
to LAX.
I have them as part of my, again, they're my first runners up because again, they're to Mexico what the McMahons are to the United States.
Yeah,
You know,
for a lack of a better term, yeah. And you
you
had
know,
them pretty much at all corners of different promotions, like you were saying, like
yeah,
AWA, WCW,
you
ECW,
know,
WWE, Eddie Guerrero becoming at the time the lightest and shortest WWE champion when that wasn't a thing. That was never going to
Viva
be a
La Raza.
thing for a guy his size, and he broke the status quo. He broke boundaries, which opened up the floodgates for everybody else.
And he was pretty jacked. Let's
He
we talk about him not. He's pretty
he
jacked.
was solid. If you've seen his 2002 independent run, he is just clean.
Yeah,
You know.
he must have been eating really well those days.
A lot of chicken and rice.
Yeah.
A lot of tuna fish,
Protein
broccoli,
shakes.
protein. It just
Yeah.
like he just looked like a Greek god at that point.
Yeah.
And
Lying, cheating, stealing.
yeah, and even Chavo was still a part of a lot of monumental moments. I mean, for a while he was the shortest match at WrestleMania history with Kane.
Yep.
And apparently he said that was
ECW
his
championship.
biggest payoff ever. And he said he wouldn't have gotten that payoff because originally they only had 2 minutes for that match. But they pitched, well, that's not going to be really remembered. What's going to be more remembered, a 2-minute match or an 8-second match?
Yes.
So that's a great mind for the business. All of them have like great minds for business.
ECW championship.
Yeah. Were you there at the Rumble in 2008?
Is that the one where Cena comes back?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I was in that building too. And were you just as confused as I am when Chavo entered? Because that Royal Rumble, they didn't announce everybody, and he was the ECW heavyweight champion, and then he just comes into the Rumble match.
Correct. Yes. I just figured we couldn't hear the microphone. I was like, maybe we missed it. It was loud in here.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was definitely crazy with all that. But
place went nuts when Cena came in at the end. I'll tell you that.
Oh my gosh! And then immediately when he entered the ring, everyone started booing.
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Although a guy that came back from a torn pec in record time.
4 months, I think it is.
Let's boo the guy. That makes sense.
Yeah. You know how it is.
Fans are fickle.
Yeah.
As Daniel Bryan used to say, fickle.
Yeah, it's wrestling, Well, now he's wrestling with a orbital bone injury, and apparently he's doing well.
Yes.
Fickle. Love the new Daniel Bryan. Didn't last nearly as long.
He still wrestles.
Yep.
He still wrestles.
Daniel Bryan doesn't. Bryan Danielson, that guy, his twin,
gotcha.
He does.
Gotcha. Yeah,
but overall, the Guerreros, history-making family, helping wrestling inside as well as outside the parameters, and even into Hollywood. So they are on my Mount Rushmore.
All right, listen, you're not going to get an argument from me. Again, they're a tremendous family, and you might have just pushed them up a couple of notches on my list.
Yep. All right, Seth. So, what about you? What person you're gonna name?
We got to name the Anoa'i family.
That's on my list as well.
You can't not put the Anoa'i family on there. Every Samoan comes from their family.
Every single one of them.
Yes, they're all related somehow.
Yep. I think there's like an image of like the family tree, and it's just like all over the place. But we'll name as much as we can. We have the Wild Samoans, Sika and Afa. You have High Chief Peter Maivia.
Yep.
You have Rikishi, Umaga. The Usos, The Rock.
Yeah, you got the Tribal Chief, Roman Reigns.
Tribal Chief, Solo Sikoa.
You got Jacob Fatu. You have
Umaga's son.
Yeah.
I think he's like...
You got Afa's son, Manu.
You have a bunch of great talent in there, too. And it was funny. Samoa Joe was on a...
Tamina.
Tamina.
Nia Jax.
Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah.
We don't talk about him. But apparently Samoa Joe said he's not a part of that family, but he's like, if you ask my grandfather, they'd probably connect it somehow. So he's like, he might be a cousin adjacent, maybe.
To me, if I wasn't related, I'd say I was. That's a family you want to be a part of.
Absolutely, because look at the success each of them have. Again, not just in wrestling, but just outside of wrestling as well.
Every single one.
Now,
every single one.
Now, do you think The Rock obviously is the most recognizable member of that family by a long shot? Do you think sometimes that kind of eclipses the other family members' success pre-Roman Reigns?
It might. It might. A little bit. I mean, and it's funny because when you think about when The Rock first started, people were booing him out of the building.
They were.
When he was Rocky Maivia, and he was the bubbly faced baby face. People there, he was getting booed out. Die, Rocky, die.
Mm-hmm.
And then he became his own character, and the rest is history.
And history he made a lot of, being at one point the youngest WWE champion, the youngest Intercontinental champion at one point. And
Yeah.
he isn't the only person of the Anoa'i family to be Intercontinental champion, because you have
Nope.
Rikishi, who did it for The
Mm-hmm.
Rock, and then you have Umaga, who, by
Yes.
all intents and purposes, was the featured match at WrestleMania 23, hair versus hair, Vince McMahon
Yeah.
versus Donald Trump.
Bobby Lashley. Yeah, Bobby Lashley and Umaga.
And I'll give you a little inside scoop, Seth. That wasn't the original pairing of that Battle of the
Oh no.
Billionaires. No, originally the plan was for Hulk Hogan and Big Show to be in those spots, with Hogan being with Trump and Big Show being with the McMahons. But Big Show went on
Huh.
his vacation, so that plan went out the window. And then they
Gotcha.
thought Hulk and Khali would be good, and then Hulk's like, "Oh, my back, brother," and then
Yeah.
he sidestepped, and then the idea shifted to King Booker for Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels for Donald
Yes.
Trump.
Yeah. I like the idea of Bobby Lashley personally.
Yeah.
I thought they, the final pairings I thought were good. Gave Bobby Lashley, a young up and coming star, gave him a good rub.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Gave Umaga a great rub on the card. That's a crazy match when you think about it too. I mean, you have Vince McMahon getting his head shaved.
Yeah, and with Michael Hayes singing in the background. I got
Yes.
the bald-headed blues.
And Stone Cold involved in that too.
Yeah.
And then he came in with the do-rag McMahon for a couple of months.
Do-rag Vince was a character, and that's putting it lightly.
Yeah. But getting back to the Anawahis, you also said Yokozuna was a world champion besides The Rock and besides Roman Reigns.
Yeah, and again, even if you think about it, the Anoa'i family is the only family in history currently to main event both nights of WrestleMania.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you had the Usos this year, and then Roman this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll get Roman again this year too.
And it's and Roman being the most, I believe he's headlined the most WrestleManias in history, I believe.
Yeah. And I mean, you want to talk about the guy who finally came out of his shell. Remember when he was getting booed out of the building, after his match with The Undertaker, where he just stood in the ring for 10 minutes and they just booed him.
Yeah, and do you think, and going back to the McMahon family and the Roman Reigns push that was happening, and honestly, what Roman needed to be doing was what he's doing right now. But do you think if he hadn't gone through those ugly duckling years, to put it in a better term, do you think the tribal chief would hit as hard as it has today?
No. I mean, listen. Part of the reason why we like The Rock so much is because The Rock went through those same growing pains too.
Yeah.
You can't be. These guys were force fed to the crowd, and they ended up making a jump on their own. Very similar.
Mm-hmm.
The Rock and Roman are very, very similar when it comes to that.
Yeah, I will say that Roman is probably a better actor as an active WWE superstar than The Rock is.
Okay. All right. Hey, listen, The Rock's had some great movies. He's had some bombs.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you this: can you name 2 movies where The Rock doesn't act like himself in?
Nope.
I can actually name.
I might have been a try.
I can actually name a couple. Have you ever seen Central Intelligence?
Nope.
With Kevin Hart.
My favorite Rock movie is the one with the San Andreas Fault.
I haven't seen that one actually, but I heard good things about it.
That's a great one. Where he's involved in the earthquake. That's a great one. That's my favorite Rock movie.
Yeah, but Central Intelligence with Kevin Hart, who plays a former overweight kid that Kevin Hart, who was the popular jock in school, was the only one who was nice to him. And then The Rock came back as a secret agent, and he's just like a nerdy personality who just likes to quote 16 Candles and everything. It's a ridiculous movie, but it's really funny. I saw it in theaters. It was pretty funny.
Okay. All right. I mean, let's not forget Fast and the Furious as well.
Absolutely. Fast and Furious movies, he made his mark on it. He even made a spinoff of it that Roman was in there. Put in his own culture in there too, which was pretty cool. And then
Yeah, I mean he's had a lot of movies that are forgettable as well, though. So I hear what you're saying.
yeah. And let's go to some other members of the Anawahi family. Let's go to Rikishi because he wasn't Rikishi right away, right?
No,
He was Junior Fatu for a bit.
they had they were part of the SST,
Yep.
Samoan SWAT team, right? Samu and Fatu,
hmm
and then they broke them up and had him go single.
hmm
I think he was the Sultan at one
Yeah, he
point.
was the Sultan. You know, the storyline was his tongue was cut off, so
Oh
that's
yes,
why he had that mask on his face,
yes, and he had the Iron Sheik speaking for him.
which is a high honor. And
Yes,
then
um,
let's talk about how Rikishi did it for The Rock. Did you think Rikishi should have been the one that did it for The Rock?
they did it for the. I mean, listen, it made sense storyline wise.
Did it though?
It got to a point where they kind of had to finish the story.
I
Talk about finishing the
I
story.
understand.
You know, I mean, the thing went on for so long, and I think at the beginning, obviously, they didn't have someone planned,
They did
and
not
they
know.
kind of were winging it. You know, I think a heel turn for Rikishi, was a good idea. I don't think it, obviously didn't last very long.
hmm
Too Cool was very popular back then.
Yeah, they
Everyone
were
loved seeing
very
Rikishi dance.
popular. And I'll give you some
Everyone loved seeing
names who were rumored to be the person to run over Stone Cold.
Go for it.
Brian Gewirtz, who was interviewed before his
Okay.
autobiography came out, said that there was a pitch where every day Vince would change his mind, and one day he's like, "All right, it's going to be Taz. Taz is going to be the one." And then that didn't happen. And then there was a strong rumor that Billy Gunn was the one to
Yes, I do remember that
run
one.
Steve
Yes.
Austin Network. Like they were trying to make Billy Gunn a single star, which I was fine for, but apparently what was holding him back, according to Bruce Pritchard, was his asthma.
Okay. All right. I never knew that.
So apparently that's what was holding him back from being a single star, according to Bruce Pritchard, whether you want to believe him
Right.
or not. You know, he has a very sus track record when it comes to validity, let's say.
I mean, he did have a little. He was an intercontinental champion at one
He
point.
was. He didn't hold on
Yep.
to it long, but he did hold on to the Intercontinental
Correct.
Championship.
The Outlaws are very popular.
They are, but maybe not as
And now
popular as.
he's still wrestling, and he's still wrestling
But
at 60 years
and
old.
ironically, with the Outlaws, the Usos actually dethroned the Outlaws to win the tag
Yes.
team championships for the first time, I
Correct.
believe.
Correct.
And let's talk about the Usos
That's
as a tag team. And in
greatest
annals,
tag team.
you think they're the greatest tag team of all time?
Yes. Yes. And I'm a little upset that they were broken up. I understand why they did it.
hmm
I'm hoping at some point we do see them back together. But right now, I feel like, Jay Uso, sorry, Jimmy Uso and Solo, to me are the today's version of when we had the new Dream Team with Dino Bravo and Greg Valentine.
Mm,
You know,
interesting point. Yeah.
you have the new Uso brothers.
hmm
But whereas main event Jay Uso is getting going front and center, Jimmy Uso's not. He's he's getting his ass beat every week.
Which
So
I think he's been excelled at. Not saying that he doesn't deserve a big push, but I think he's playing
correct,
the part brilliantly.
correct.
Remember backstage when Jimmy was like, "I'm on the injured reserve list. I can't do something," and then Roman's like,
Yeah.
"What'd you say?" And Jimmy's like, "I'm off the injured reserve. I'll do something." And
It's,
Roman's like, "Okay, yeah, that's what I thought." You know.
when he sold the RKO for half an hour a couple weeks ago, it was
Yes, I
phenomenal.
saw that video. They had to like,
They had to
pick him
roll him
out,
out of the
yeah,
ring.
just to put him out there. But
Yeah,
another person we forgot to mention of the Anawai family. Let's talk about Yokozuna.
we started
Yep.
world champion WrestleMania 9,
hmm
WrestleMania 10. You
Yeah.
know, he was he was a big boy. He
Yep.
was you know I'll be honest, I believed he was Japanese until I found out he wasn't.
Mm. How'd you feel about that? Did you feel like you were lied to?
Not really. Listen, I was like, all right, makes listen, good. Shame on me.
Yeah. But also, WWE released a wonderful special on Yokozuna. I believe it was their
Yes,
Icons documentary special about Yokozuna and
yes,
just how caring this guy was to his family. He paid for Rikishi to have his heat at one point when Rikishi was struggling to
yes,
pay
yes.
for his heat. So he was a
And he
very,
paid for
very
them.
cool guy. very cool guy, very caring.
Everyone loved him. Yeah.
It's a shame that his weight got as out of control as it did.
Correct.
Now I'm not playing like psychologist or anything like that, but
No, not at all.
do you think that Yokozuna had to feel like he had to be big in order to maintain his spot, for lack of a better term?
Very possible. I mean, listen, the character of Yokozuna is not going to be a small guy,
Hmm.
right? But at the same time, I would have thought that he would have, he would have been told, and he would have cared a little bit more about, staying healthy.
Yeah,
I mean, right? Don't they talk about in that documentary about how at one point he was so heavy he couldn't even walk?
yeah, he was. I think at his max, I think he was close to 700,
Yeah,
and
I
then
mean,
like he would eat. Apparently, he would eat the. He would get
the opponent.
like Bruce Pritchard said he would eat. I forgot like chicken, like it was like chicken something. I'm pretty sure it was. I think it was chicken butt. Like he would just eat
Okay,
chicken butt. Like he would like clear like 30 or 40 of them in like one sitting, and then they would have like
Jesus,
a giant thing of this, like the sushi tower. When you go to like
right?
a bar mitzvah or a wedding,
Yes,
they have like the sushi tower where you could pick off from your plate,
he'd eat the whole
eat
thing.
the whole
Yep.
thing, and it's just a shame that he couldn't control that. But for as short a time as he was active in WWE, he did have a lot of great moments, as you said, main eventing WrestleManias both times. Do you think him losing to Hogan in that short amount of time kind of ruined the mystique?
I mean, it's Hulk Hogan. It is Hulk Hogan. I mean, he did go over Hulk Hogan. You know,
After a camera blew up in his face.
yes. I mean, he did go over Hulk Hogan, and he did have a championship run that lasted the year. So, I don't think it ruined anything.
Mhm.
It was part of the storyline back then.
Yeah.
You know,
Bec-
all about stories.
yeah. And speaking of more stories with Yokozuna, he was also a tag team with Owen Hart. Now, out of all of
Yes,
Owen Hart tag team partners, where would you rank Yokozuna?
he was my number one for him. I love that team.
Really?
That team and him and Owen with the Bulldog are my two favorite Owen teams.
Hmm.
You know, I don't even put the new foundation with Jim Neidhart on the list.
Oh, you don't have. What about High Energy with Coco Beware?
Nope, not even on the list.
All right.
When he came in as a mystery partner for Owen,
Hmm.
I mean, and they had Jim Cornette, it was phenomenal.
Yeah. So we pretty much
You know,
went through the best of all the Anawahi family members. Who do you think will
yes.
go down currently as the best Anawahi family member?
Good question. I mean, I
And
guess,
again, this is all subjective.
yeah. I mean, again, besides what's going on in the ring, I think you got to put in The Rock. I mean, the guy besides being wrestling and being in Hollywood,
Hmm.
the guy owns the XFL. He owns, a tequila company. I mean, his net worth is a
He
lot.
has Zoa. He has Project Rock with
Yeah,
Under Armour. He has all these brand deals that
he's a businessman.
that transcend wrestling. You know.
Yeah, I would put The Rock there.
Yeah, I agree. But
I put The
so
Rock
if we
there.
were to have a Mount Rushmore of the Anawahi family, The Rock would probably be the face, right?
Yeah,
And going
yeah, I think so.
back to the Mount Rushmore of the Guerrero family, probably would be maybe Eddie.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think Eddie. Because of his time with WWE, I think he was the most popular.
yeah, I agree. But anyway, we got 3 of mine already on here. We got 2 of yours on here.
Yeah.
Why don't you name one of yours?
So I have a lot. I mean, so let's go with the Hart family. We
Ooh,
already touched on them.
oh yeah, they actually just missed my list.
I mean, you have Brett, you have Owen, you have Natty today.
Hmm.
Jim Neidhart's part of the family.
David Boy
Technically, the
Smith.
Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, they were that Hart Foundation in '97 was phenomenal. That's my favorite faction ever.
Mhm.
You had the dungeon with Stu Hart. Think of all the guys that came through there. Chris Benoit. No, we're not supposed to mention his name.
Mhm.
You know, Dynamite Kid. I mean, so many guys came through that dungeon.
Yeah,
Um,
Chris Jericho and Lance Storm, even though it
yeah,
wasn't the dungeon, it was the
right,
last class, technically, of the Hart family.
right. But I have the Hearts on my list.
Hmm. Now,
I
when
mean,
you.
because again, they're to Calgary and to Canada what the Guerreros are to Mexico.
Yeah, especially with Stampede Wrestling, where a lot of guys got their
Yeah.
start, like Brian
Yes.
Pillman, Jake Roberts,
Yep.
all those guys. And I'm going to ask you not a tough question, but is the Hart family probably the first family that got the proper exposure of being a wrestling family on a national television that you remember?
They might have been.
Because
They might have been.
even though in WWE it was only Brett and Owen that kind of got the spotlight, but you had like that Survivor
Bruce.
Series match with Bruce and
Yep.
you had Stu and Helen occasionally on the front
Yep.
row of champion,
Yeah.
like when they would have a championship
Getting,
match. I remember they were there
getting
when
made fun
Brett
of by
won.
Jerry Lawler.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then Bret Hart would also have them for his championship matches, like when he won the Intercontinental Championship from Mr. Perfect. And I remember this commentary line when Bobby the Brain was on commentary, and he's like taking digs at the Hart family as he usually does, and he said, "Huh, 9 months? You knew you were gonna have a baby for 9 months, and the best you could come up with is Bruce."
Yeah. Great line.
Yeah,
Great line.
Missed the Bobby the Brain. And no, Bobby the Brain Heenan's family will not be on
Nope.
this list, even though it's named
Not
the
a real
family.
family. Yes.
We're talking
Not a
about
real
blood relatives or married into the
Yes.
family.
Correct.
Yeah, but
Correctamundo, Richie.
yep. And with the Hart family, who do you think was the more talented one? Do you think it was Brett or do you think it was Owen?
Yeah. I think it was Brett. Brett got more exposure, right? Brett got more exposure. But, when we saw that Brett versus Owen feud, you got to really see Owen. But Owen really excelled. Besides his intercontinental runs, he was always, in that tag team range. We never got to see him as a world champion. But, for that alone, I don't know if he would have been, been a standalone face of the company like Brett was.
Yeah.
But, you look at Brett. Everyone knows Bret Hart. Bret Hart's got his own clothing line with Roots of Fight right now. He had some of the most classic matches there were.
And this is being recorded. This is being recorded after NXT Deadline. We saw CM Punk wear one of them in front of Shawn Michaels.
Great, yes.
So
I have that T-shirt.
It's a pretty good T-shirt.
Yeah,
and
it's great clothes. They have Macho Man on there now too.
Yeah, and with Owen Hart, do you think? Because in Dark Side of the Ring, Chris Jericho mentioned that Owen Hart probably would have had a career renaissance in the year 2000 when you had people like Jericho, Eddie, Benoit, Angle, all these guys who were newly coming into the company.
If he was still around, I agree 100%.
Do you think he would have? Do you think he would have gotten to that main event level, or do you think he would stay in that mid card level?
It's hard to tell. Listen, they put the belt on Eddie Guerrero, right? They put the belt on Rey Mysterio.
They did, but that was years and years later.
Listen, after Brett went to WCW, and Owen stuck around, I could have seen, I could see them at some point maybe putting that title
around, was forced to stay.
With the Nation. Part of the Nation of Domination, with his caution line outfit, black and yellow.
Had the team with Jeff Jarrett, too.
Great team. I love them. They were good. You know what? We could put that on our list of Owen tag team partners, too.
Yep, we have that one. Owen Hart was just a tremendous wrestler where no one was doing the things he was doing, but then you would later see it with guys like Edge, Christian, Jericho. Just this mix of high-flying ability with sound, technical wrestling, and psychology. And I think that's what Owen brought, as opposed to Brett, who was a very big mix of very technical, very ground-based, not very
best there was.
Flashy. He did get, I think 97 was probably his best year from a career standpoint.
I can see that. Definitely wasn't the WCW years, so we can agree on that.
After we saw that War Games match, oh boy.
Yeah.
That was brutal.
But 97 was definitely, that year with the Hart Foundation was phenomenal. We never got to see the rematch with him and Shawn Michaels, but we did, but not with without the controversy, I should say.
And now with the the Hart Foundation. Now, I know this isn't a Mount Rushmore of factions, but where would you rank in, if you had a list of top 5, top 10, where would the Hart Foundation as a faction be?
Well, I already said they were my number one faction for a long time, so I would have them up there with DX and the NWO and the Horsemen. I love that Hart Foundation with Bret, Owen, the Bulldog, Neidhart, Brian Pillman. I mean, it was such a good faction.
A lot of moving parts that just made sense.
Yeah, I wish we would have gotten longer for them.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Pillman passed away, and then Bret left, and then
they're all gone.
Except Bret, Bret. It is a shame, But when you think of family rivalries, I think the first one that comes to mind is always going to be Bret and Owen. And I think, and I don't think a brother versus brother feud has ever come close since.
No.
Like there were attempts, like you had the Hardys. We're now in the Usos, and they haven't really started cooking yet. So we don't know how they're going to compare to Bret and Owen as of this recording. But back then, there was a believability. Kayfabe was still pretty strong in that sense during that time period. Do you think because people don't want to see family fight that these other feuds haven't hit because after the fact that
possible?
Do you think that plays a factor?
It's possible. I mean, to me, like I said, and we talked about this, when they were first breaking up the Usos, I'm like, why would you do this? And, you said to me, so they can get a brother versus brother fight. And I think my response was, who wants to see that? But at the same time, I also say the same thing for Ray and Dominic.
Yeah.
And I was wrong. And I was wrong on that one too. So, sometimes you just got to give it a chance.
And
but Bret and Owen, that lasted, think how long that went on for.
Yeah.
That went on for a long time. Even to the day they reformed the Hart Foundation and Bret called him to the ring and said, Owen, I need you. Look what they're doing to us. Look at these fans. They're putting us against each other. You're my brother. When you had that problem with that teacher, who walked you to school and got in the teacher's face? It was me. Right? Like that you felt something with those two brothers.
Yeah.
And whether they were against each other or they were a faction together, they were definitely my favorite brother pairing.
Real brother pairing, right? Because we had a lot.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember I got flack on TikTok when I predicted that Jimmy Uso would turn on Jey Uso at SummerSlam. I was right, by the way.
You did. I remember.
And everyone's
you
like,
were right.
And it's like, why would he turn on his own brother? And I was like, have you seen wrestling for the history of time? If you have a brother, they're going to turn on you.
If you have a wife, they're going to turn on you.
We saw that in AEW recently. Yeah. So
let's not even go there. I mean, dude, we got that kid's mom involved now. I'm like, oh my god. Yeah, let's not even talk about that.
Christian Cage is amazing, though. I will say that.
Christian and Edge are not real brothers.
They are not. But apparently, this is actually a screwed up story. Now that we're on the topic, so apparently they're at a diner in Toronto, and somebody was serving them, and they were so proud of serving Edge and Christian, and he was saying, "Oh, your father comes in all the time to this diner." And they had to break it to him. It's like, we're not actually brothers. So this guy who claimed to be their father was just getting
that's great,
free stuff,
That's phenomenal.
Some people are just jacked up a little bit, but
that's great. Imagine being able to pull that off.
Got to look like him first.
This is true. Richie, you could do it.
Possibly, but Christian Cage.
Richie right now, he's got his sleeveless tank top on. He could. He can definitely pass.
I just need to get my turtleneck game on, like Christian Cage.
Yes.
Maybe I'll wear that at AEW World's End.
Guy's jacked and he's wrestling in a turtleneck. It makes no sense.
Hey, but it makes you hate him, doesn't it?
This is true. This is
true. He's covering that Greek god body, but he's covering up with a turtleneck.
A sleeveless
turtleneck. That's heat.
Yes.
But anyway, if we had to put a face on the Mount Rushmore, would Bret probably be the one to
I think
be
so.
that head?
I think he's the most famous Hart. What do you think?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
It's his theme song. So,
yeah. And then we haven't mentioned her, but Natalya is a very solid addition to the women's division. It has been an anchor for that division for many years, for better or for worse.
Over a decade.
The boat, as she calls herself.
Yes.
Best of all
time.
And
Yep.
we have Tyson Kidd, who was personally one of my favorites. You could listen to the Tyson Kidd episode in the archives.
You know,
Tremendous underrated worker. Several tag teams that were phenomenal.
he right now coaches the women.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he does supply us with our favorite workout supplements.
Yes, he does. Workhorse Fitness.
Yes.
Get it online. We are not sponsored, by the way.
No, we're not. That's why I did not give my code.
Yep, not yet. All right. So we got the McMahons, the Anawahi family, and Harts for you, and we have the McMahons, Anawahi, and Guerreros for me, which means we have 2 more to go.
We do.
All right.
We do.
Would you like to reveal your last?
You go.
Me, I go. All right.
I went first last time, so you go.
All right. I have the Rhodes family.
They're on mine too.
Oh, we got the same one.
Well, so again, for my last one, just so you know, I have the Rhodes, but I have them linked up with Flair and Orton and Von Erich.
Oh,
so it's a very hard. Yeah, it's a very hard decision to make.
Yeah.
If you go back to my original criteria,
Mm-hmm.
Dusty was a booker.
Yeah.
Dusty, was key behind the scenes. Dusty was a world champion.
Mm-hmm.
Dusty came up with many matches. Dustin has been a generational talent, still going, all these years later, 30 years, I believe.
Yep.
And now you got Cody, who is arguably the most popular guy in WWE.
And also started another company, or helped.
And started another company that he left and is a bigger, and he's now even a bigger star.
Correctamundo.
Yeah. I mean, can't go wrong with that.
No, absolutely not.
He's got a great theme song, too.
It's on my workout playlist.
Mine, too.
And then you got Dusty, and going further with Dusty, what about the innovative concepts that he came up with? Let's talk about war games.
War games? Yeah.
War games. Some not so cool concepts like the what was the match with Hogan and Savage and like the electric chair in WCW?
Oh yeah,
like the Halloween Havoc match or whatever.
Some of those mid '90s WCW matches were not good.
Mm-hmm. And also with
the Dusty did end up in the NWO.
Yeah. And then you have we also have the Shockmaster as a part of the Rhodes family. If you want to go even deeper.
Yeah. We did.
Like Tugboat.
We did. Tugboat, yes. Uncle Fred, the Shockmaster.
Yep.
We had, the famous Dusty finishes.
Mm-hmm.
But War Games, here we are. They started in 1984, 1985, and they're still around.
Yep. It took a long time for them to get the clearance, but
yes.
they came in. And ironically, TNA had their own version of War Games called Lethal Lockdown, and the first one happened when Dusty Rhodes was the booker / figurehead of TNA on screen.
And WWE did have, and still does, the Elimination Chamber, which is a spin-off as well.
I got to tell you a fun Dusty Rhodes story that Bruce told on his podcast. And, Dusty is a big proponent of the bull rope match, right?
Yes.
Going
in the bunkhouse. Oh, we forgot the bunkhouse stampede.
Oh, well, I'm going to say a story about that after this one.
Okay.
But with this one, the bull rope match. Do you remember the bull rope match between Eddie Guerrero and JBL?
Yes.
So allegedly, they couldn't come up with a finish for this bull rope match. And Vince said to Bruce, call Dusty. And Bruce is like, Vince, I can't call Dusty. And he's like, why not? Yeah, he works for TNA. I can't ask him for a bull. It's like,
can't just call him up.
Yeah. And Vince is like, call Dusty. And then Bruce called Dusty, and Dusty gave him a finish. And that's the finish we saw on television. And now the bunkhouse.
Everyone loves it.
And then the bunkhouse stampede. Seth, would you like to describe what the bunkhouse stampede match is?
It was basically a battle royal where everybody came dressed as they want. They could bring, weapons with them. And it was a battle royal over the top rope. And they went through the whole month too. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just a one-off. They would bring the bunkhouse stampede to cities, across the United States. Mm-hmm. And the person who won the most would be the bunkhouse stampede champion, if I recall.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the innovation of the character Goldust. Because there was a lot of controversy with this character when it first happened.
Sure.
And there was a lot of Like I said, controversy. Just a lot of. It was a
Hey,
different,
that's Dusty Rhodes'
yeah,
son,
different
and look
time.
what Vince is making him do.
Yeah, and I never realized while watching Goldust his look was based on the Oscar statue.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which was I found was pretty cool.
Goldust.
You as a fan, how did you feel about the overtones that the character would give off?
I thought it was perfect for the Attitude Era.
Hmm.
When he first came in before the Attitude Era, he was definitely, character before his time.
Hmm.
And then I remember that one interview with the Ultimate Warrior
Hmm.
when the Warrior came back in
Yeah,
'96, and or even Razor Ramon. I mean, I thought those guys were gonna legit put him through a wall.
yeah,
You know, Ahmed Johnson, another
yeah.
one.
The mouth to mouth
But then they made
segment
it.
that was really
Yes,
pushing
but
boundaries
when
at
they
that
got to
time.
the Attitude Era, he was perfect for that time.
Hmm.
He was the ideal Attitude Era
Well,
character.
also during that Attitude Era with Goldust, there was a lot of toying around with the character of Goldust and
Yes,
Dusty Rhodes because before I believe he was a Christian preacher, and then he was feuding with Val Venus, and then had
yes.
Luna Vachon as
Right about that.
manager as the artist formerly known as Goldust. That's when the artist formerly known as
Yes.
Prince was going on, and they were really just toying around with the character until he reverted back to Goldust. But by then, do you think kind of the bloom was off the rose a little bit?
I don't think so. Because I mean, he had that feud with Triple H where he brought in Marlena, his real life wife. That was part of it. Um, I think my favorite, was how Goldust would evolve. We got to the early 2000s, and he had comedy Goldust with Booker T. That was some of his best years.
That was probably, yeah, one of his best years, if not his best year.
Yeah.
And then if you want to talk about
Yeah.
more runs with the company, he had his run with his brother Cody.
Yeah. They were tag team champions against the
Hmm.
Shield.
And they had, unfortunately, a really bad match at Fastlane. But then they made up for it in AEW,
Yeah,
which was said by Tony Khan himself, the match that defines the promotion.
sure. And at some point, we'll see Dustin back with WWE, where he belongs for the Hall of Fame.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, he definitely has a Hall of Fame worthy career. And would you put would you put Cody Rhodes as the person to induct him?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, it can't be Dusty,
Yeah.
right? It's got to be Dustin.
I was gonna
It's got to be Cody. It's got to be his brother.
I was gonna ask if you would think Booker T would have a shot.
Ooh, good call.
Mhm.
You know what? No, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with his brother.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go because we'll stick with the family.
Hmm.
But if Cody wasn't around, then I'd go with Booker
Hmm.
T.
And speaking of Cody, let's transition to Cody, shall we?
Yeah.
The grandson of a plumber, the ugly duckling of the Legacy trio, which was ironic because Legacy was meant to be a vehicle to help both Ted DiBiase and Cody Rhodes, and then Randy Orton was the one who ended up being looking like the best
Yeah.
out of that. But what's still
Um,
a fun faction, yeah. Cody
yeah.
Rhodes also went through a lot of transitions. You had dashing, then you had undashing, and then you had the Intercontinental Champion, then you had the mustache, and then you
Yeah. Him
had
with Damian Sandow.
Team Rhodes Scholars. Then you had
Yeah.
Stardust,
Yeah.
and then you had
And then he had
the American Nightmare.
a character he's created on his own.
And
And his
the symbolic, like, I feel like a lot of people give Cody a bad rap. Those who say, "Oh, he's vanilla, he's being shoved down our throats." I haven't seen that personally on television. I think
nope.
it's just a lot of people who are saying, "Oh, this is the John Cena effect," when in actuality they don't know what the John Cena effect is, because you and I, we watched through those John Cena years, and if you recall, those Raws were about 75% John Cena majority of the time.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
Cody is
we sometimes only get no. We get Cody for a few minutes
yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. So I don't think he's being shoved down our throats at all. And I
Yeah.
think he's the
No.
perfect babyface to usher in that new era.
Yeah. Listen, he's doing everything he needs to do to win over the fans too.
Mm-hmm.
You
And
know.
let's talk about briefly. I know you don't like talking about AEW, but let's talk about his AEW run a little bit.
Okay.
And
You mean where the fans booed him out of the
yeah,
building?
we're going to talk about that. And I could see where the AEW fans were coming from in that, because I'm a big fan of Cody Rhodes, but there was a time where his programs were very disassociated from the show, and I feel like they became their own little universe, the Codyverse as it was dubbed, and it didn't necessarily have a flow with the show. It's kind of like when Raw Underground was a thing, and then it
Yes.
kind of like stopped, like the momentum if that Raw show was happening, and it just kind of felt weird and awkward. And I think AEW was in that similar position with Cody. Not saying all the stuff that Cody did was bad, but there was a lot of teases of turning heel. There was the golden shovel thing, which I found amusing. There was the table fire where he took all of that table being burned and
And still got booed out of the building.
still got booed. But you got to give him credit. He did his darndest to become the face of AEW, and he was the face of AEW for a while because he had the Go Big Show. He
Yeah.
was one of the people who was actually running the show backstage in AEW, and we're never going to know, at least for the time being, why Cody left AEW. He did say it was a personal issue, but we don't know what that personal issue is.
Probably knows he'll be a bigger star if he goes to WWE.
Yep, and when he comes
And
back
he is.
when he comes back to WWE, were you expecting him to essentially grab that top spot right out of the
Nope.
gate?
Nope. Nope.
Did you think
I
he
didn't,
deserved it?
and I think he's so sure.
Mhm.
I mean, he went out on his own, and he proved that Cody Rhodes is a star.
Mhm.
You know, and there was no need to put him into the mid card as Stardust or Dashing Cody.
Mhm.
The guy's got his own brand. Um, people come to see Cody. I was there in Dallas when he came out. That place went nuts.
Mhm.
It really did. Everyone loves Cody, so
Mhm.
well deserved.
Yeah, and
I'm not gonna lie to you. I also I'm probably gonna make a lot of people angry when I say this, but you know I'm one of the people who say I don't know if he needs to finish his story this year.
Mhm.
You know, um, if he got where's the rush? Why not finish the
Mhm.
story next year or the year after? The money's in the chase.
Mhm.
So if something bigger comes up for this year for him, I'm all part of it. I say he deserves the biggest spot though.
Yeah. Uh, I do see where you're coming from about him not finishing the story at WrestleMania 40, which is which it would a lot of people think is the proper end to a Roman Reigns championship run.
Right.
And what bigger way can you get at WrestleMania 40?
Why not WrestleMania 41?
Eh, yeah, I think people just like the 40 number. It's nice, it's
Oh,
clean,
okay.
it's round. You know,
Okay.
uh, but again, with Cody Rhodes and finishing his story, which is probably one of the more engaging not under the radar, but like a story that always gets brought back into all Cody stories, which turns into this
Right.
bigger arc of WWE. The second one being the Bloodline that's currently happening right now. And that's the only thing that I do have concerns with when it comes to Cody's story, because after WrestleMania, hypothetically, let's say it's Roman and Cody and Roman goes over, then what? There's
Yeah.
always the question of what's next, and we saw at
What's
least
next?
at least this year the what's next for both of them. And storyline wise, it didn't make much sense for Brock to attack Cody. It would make sense if Brock attacked Cody when Cody was champion,
Champion. Mm-hmm.
and with the Roman Reigns and the Bloodline stuff, you could have done that without the championship, with
Correct.
Roman. So it all becomes like, can they keep Cody busy and the fans invested if he were to lose a second time? That's the biggest question that you have to ask.
Well, who's to say he has to be in there with Roman this year to lose?
Hmm.
I mean, what if they did a Cody versus Randy Orton this year?
I don't think the fans would really buy that as well. I
Why
think
not?
I think it would be more because they already built the Roman and Cody stuff throughout the year
Okay.
periodically. And I think Randy Orton and Cody being on such good terms, I don't think there's a real reason for Randy or Cody to turn on the other at this point, especially with Randy signing with SmackDown. So it's one of those things where it's like if there was a championship involved, I think there would be a reason for that matchup. But as of now, I don't think that matchup logistically really makes sense.
We have 4 months, so we can see how they're going to go in for the next 4 months.
Well, yeah, everything comes and goes in the next 4 months, but with
everything changes.
Yeah, with Randy most likely being one of, if not the opponent for Roman Reigns at the next PLE. You know, I think there's a possibility there could be a triple threat between Roman, LA Knight, and Randy at the Rumble, and then you get Randy at Elimination Chamber at Australia, because you gotta fill up those seats, man. Which apparently, like I think Meltzer said they only sold 7,000, but then it later came out they sold about 30,000. You know, so I don't know who's getting their information right anymore, but overall,
Meltzer doesn't like WWE, so.
And I'm gonna ask a very big toughy question for you right here, Seth. Do you think Cody will surpass his dad as the head honcho of the Rhodes family?
Could. He very well could. Dusty was popular, but I mean, you know what? Did Dusty have his own brand? Did Dusty? I do think Cody's more popular than Dusty right now. You know,
and you saw
Dusty in those,
and you saw Dusty in those back when he was fairly active
in the 1980s.
Yeah,
he was big in NWA, but he wasn't that big when he went to WWF. He was wearing polka dots.
Yeah, but overall in the landscape of professional wrestling, so that includes WWE, WCW, everything that Dusty did. Do you think what Cody did outside of WWE in combination of his current WWE run, like, can you say?
I'm going to say to be continued. I'm going to say we have to see how it plays out.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
We can't. I can't make that answer now. We have to see how it plays out.
Right, because
I can't anoint him the head of the family today. Got to see how it plays out over the next few years.
So on the Mount Rushmore, you would put Dusty Rhodes.
I put Dusty.
Yeah, sounds good. And that's our Mount Rushmore of wrestling families. For myself, I have the Guerreros, the Rhodes family, the McMahon family, and the Anawahi family. And Seth, yours are
the McMahons, the Anawahis, the Harts, and the Rhodes.
Yeah, so look at us. You know, we got 3 out of 4 ain't bad. The same.
And you know what? Right on my borderline too. I mean, Flair's could have very easily gone in there too, because between Rick and Charlotte, you got 30 world championships.
Boy, that's a lot. That's a lot of them.
And everybody in pop culture knows Ric Flair.
Yeah, he's in Bad Bunny songs for crying out loud.
Yes. You know, I had the Ortons on my list as possibles. You had 3 generations, plus you had Uncle Barry O.
Yep.
So
I had the Von Erichs in mine.
Yep. The Gagnes.
Yeah.
The Gagnes could have gone in there too. You know,
DiBiase's.
The Funks. We didn't even talk about the Funks.
Yeah, the DiBiase's, even though they're kind of in a deep doo-doo right now.
Yes. You know, but you had, Mike DiBiase, Ted, and Ted Jr.
And I think Brett DiBiase too.
Yes. Yeah, you forget about him. Yep. And don't forget about the Colones in Puerto Rico.
Yeah. Carlito's now back in WWE.
We could have legit, gone from the Mount Rushmore, to a battle royal of first families. So, but I think with 2 of us have pretty good lists.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Mr. Sensational, Mr. Seth, it's always great having you on here.
Yep. I love being on, Richie.
All right. Yeah, and you're definitely going to come on the next one. We're going to have a fantastic topic for you next time. But
can't wait.
Everybody, this has been this episode of Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. I, of course, am Richie Mars. You can follow us on the TikTok, the Twitter, and the Instagram at Retold Richie Mars. TTFN, ta-ta for now. See you next time.